Okay, today let's talk about the Safe Water program. First, I'll be covering water legislation. So, under the Safe Drinking Water Act of 2002, there is Ontario Regulation 170, drinking water systems, and these govern large municipal residential systems, so systems that serve over 100 private residences, small municipal residential systems that serve 6 to 100 private residences, non-municipal year-round residential systems, so water systems that serve 6 or more private residences in apartments, condos, townhouses, trailer parks that have 6 or more connections, designated facilities such as childcare facilities, children's camps, schools, and universities. So again, Reg 170 water systems are large municipal systems that serve private houses and houses under 100 private residences. Non-municipal year-round systems that would be found in apartments, condos, and townhouses, and designated facilities, so things such as children's camps, childcare facilities, healthcare facilities, schools, and universities. Next, under the Health Protection Promotion Act, we have Ontario Regulation 319, small drinking water systems, and these cover systems that are municipally owned, so large municipal non-residential drinking water systems, such as ones in airports and industrial parks, small municipal non-residential drinking water systems, so ones in small community centers, libraries, and sports and rec facilities, non-municipal seasonal residential drinking systems, so seasonal trailer parks and camps, large non-municipal non-residential drinking systems, so systems in motels and resorts, small non-municipal non-residential drinking water systems, so ones in motels, restaurants, gas stations, and churches. So again, Regulation 319 is under the HPPA, so these are our water systems, and they mainly cover non-residential systems with exception to trailer parks and camps. And it's important to note that most of these systems are in municipally owned areas. So, for example, for the large non-residential. So the main difference between 170 is mainly for private residences, and 319 is for municipally owned, and as well as motels, restaurants, trailer parks. Also, under the HPPA, any drinking waters within food premises fall under the Ontario Regulation 493, which is food premises. So let's talk about the Safe Drinking Water Act of 2002 and Ontario Regulation 170, drinking water systems. So operators under this legislation are required to respond to adverse water quality incidents. So they must report it to the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, so MECP, and they will ensure that the requirements are met and enforced. So under 170, some testing parameters are total coliform and E. coli, which should be non-detectable, sodium, its max should be 20 milligrams per liter, fluoride at 1.5 milligrams per liter, and lead at 0.01 milligrams per liter. So if they test and there are some adverse results, so if a test sample, at least for bacteria, comes back over 00, the lab will also notify public health and the system operator immediately, and it should be done live in person and then followed up with a written report within 24 hours. Also, system operators must notify public health and MECP immediately after and must provide a written report 24 hours after. Public health must instruct that minimum corrective actions are outlined in the regulations and to take steps that are directed by the medical officer of health. When the issue is resolved, the operator must report again to public health and MECP within 7 days. So again, if a 170 drinking water system has an adverse test result, public health will be notified, and that is our only involvement in 170 systems. We do not enforce. We just get notified when these test results come back. And if these test results, again, they are a health hazard, public health can provide directives and orders to close if a adverse test result is by. But day-to-day operations, from my interpretation, are enforced by the Ministry of Environment and Conservation Parks. Let me see if that's right. Yeah, Conservation and Parks. So next, under the Health Protection and Promotion Act, we have Regulation 319, small drinking water systems. And these systems, public health inspectors perform site-specific risk assessment using the risk categorization tool, so RCAT. This determines the risk level for each system. PHIs also have to communicate all requirements to owners. They can issue directives, educate owners and operators, and recommend that they pursue training opportunities. The PHIs will monitor compliance of water sample results using Lab Results Management Application, so LRMA, and they'll respond to adverse water quality incidents and enforce if needed. So, 319 systems, public health will assess the risk level for each system, communicate to operators, issue directives and enforce based on adverse water quality results, and they'll report the results too. So under Section 5, before installing or altering any drinking water systems, the medical officer of health should be notified, and if the system hasn't been used in 60 days, it must be tested for E. coli and coliforms, and the medical officer of health must be notified. It's the responsibilities for the owner and operator, for the owner to designate an operator who will fulfill duties of the regulation. And the medical officer of health, MOH, should be notified who the operator is and where the system is, and must ensure the system is maintained and is always operating under regulation and ensure testing is done. So owners have to ensure that testing is done, operating correctly, and they have to notify the MOH who the operator is and where the system is. So Section 7 of Regulation 319, this is about directives. So PHIs can determine what requirements must be followed and what actions must take place for the operators and owners of the small drinking water system based on the risk assessment done on each small drinking water system in the health unit. Once it's done, once the risk assessment's done, the PHI can issue a directive to the small drinking water system owner or operator, and they must follow it. Usually the directive is regarding the operation of the small drinking water system. So directives can tell someone to establish frequency, location, and method of sampling, require samples to be taken through biological, chemical, and radiological parameters. It'll require operators to take training, maintain records, require that treatment equipment is installed to provide treatment, and require owners to post warning signs at every location there's service connection. And again, these directives can be amended. So let's talk about some corrective actions in 319 systems. So this is 319 is systems under the HPPA. And again, in summary, they're usually municipally owned systems that are non-residential. So if there's improper disinfection, the corrective action is to restore disinfection and immediately take steps to notify users of the system to use an alternate water source or issue a boil water advisory, and the MOH should be notified. If the water is turbid, the operator must check turbidity monitoring equipment and correct any problems identified. Backwash the nearest filter upstream from the sample. Replace the filter and then review other upstream processes too. And a resample must be taken. So if the resample from the report of turbidity is over 1 NTU, we must notify all users to use an alternate source of water, notify the MOH, and service the filtration equipment based on manufacturer recommendations. We can also flush the distribution system and plumbing connected to the small drinking water systems. So if the system uses a chlorine residual, we're looking for a free available chlorine of 0.05 milligrams per liter and a combined chlorine of 0.25 grams per liter. If the residual is low, we should flush the system in any plumbing, restore free available chlorine to 0.05 milligrams per liter, and a combined chlorine of 0.25 grams per liter. If levels can't be restored, users must be notified to use alternative water sources or boil their water. So if there is a count for E. coli and other pathogens, we have to notify all users to use alternative water source or boil their water. And this notice will stay in effect until there are no pathogens for 2 consecutive tests between 24 and 48 hours apart, or if the medical officer of health gives the okay. If the system is chlorinated, it's best to increase the dose and flush the system, so shock the water to kill the pathogens in E. coli. And this is done by increasing it to a free available chlorine of 0.2 milligrams per liter and a combined chlorine of 1 milligram per liter. And again, this is a shock level, so it's a lot higher than the normal chlorine residual. If the system doesn't take chlorine, you must take steps to disinfect it. So the other day we saw a well cap, and essentially you just remove that cap and then pour your chlorine disinfectant solution down that well cap. Now, total coliforms. If there's a adverse coliform count, a resample should be taken again, and we should shock the system and retest after. And if the system doesn't take chlorine, we must take steps to disinfect. Sodium, if there's a high sodium level, we should resample and retest as soon as possible. And it's important to notify the MOH if sodium is over 20 milligrams per liter, and then the MOH will give directions. So chemical and radiological properties in drinking water. If they're high, we should retest again. Otherwise, it should be referred to the medical officer of health. And this goes for other parameters as well that weren't listed. And we can find limits for chemical and radiological properties in water under the Ontario Drinking Water Standards. Now, lead in water. The maximum accepted concentration level is 0.01 because children under 6 are more sensitive to lead because they're still developing and their bodies can absorb lead a lot easier than adults. Lead was commonly used for plumbing in the 50s and it's very common in older homes. Lead is soft and easily dented, and it is a dull gray color that can become shiny when it's scraped. Lead can also dissolve easily in water, especially if the water has been left standing. So in Reg 170 drinking water systems, there are community lead testing programs, and municipal and non-municipal systems must take their water samples from plumbing of residential and non-residential locations and distributions systems.